Hello IB. We're now going to look at measuring the centre of data, the second part of statistics. The main ways you would have looked at before were mode, mean and median. So we're just going to go over those probably in a little bit more detail and using a lot of the new notation. So for mode, for discrete data, that's going to be your most common piece of data, and you'll just be looking at the frequency. You'll see how often that occurs. For continuous data, to find the most common piece of data may not be a good indicator because you've got a whole range of data because it is continuous. So most continuous data is grouped, and so what we're looking at here is the most common group or the most common class. So you will refer to that as the modal class. For the mean, it's the average result. This is usually not a score in the sample set because it's being calculated by adding up all the scores and dividing by the total. So this big formula here, that X with a bar on top, that you would recognise as your notation for a mean. This big sum notation here, hopefully you recognise the sigma sign from when we did sequences and series. So it's basically saying get all the scores from I equal to 1, and remember these step up in ones. So x1 plus x2 plus x3, etc. Keep going all the way up to we get to xn. So add up all your scores and divide by the number of scores. And that you should know about already. The next one here, mu, this is the symbol that we use for the population mean. Now, I'll just write that in, population mean. So when we have a whole lot of data, we may not want to put it all into our calculators to get the average. We would take a sample. So this X bar often refers to just getting a sample mean. And we use that sample mean as an estimate of the overall population mean. The population mean, that means, sorry the pun, that we've got all the data involved and got the actual mean from every piece of data available. The next one is the median. Remember, median is the middle value once we have an ordered set of data. Given the median, which may or may not be a score, that means 50% of the scores is greater than the mean and 50% is less. So it's the middle of all the data. What we do is find the n plus 1th over 2 term, or the score. So if we've got 7 scores, then you can think 7 plus 1 over 2 makes 8 over 2, so we want the 4th score. Now, when you've only got 8 scores, you can write them out in order, and it's easy to do that crossing off from either end to come up with our middle score of 7. So our median here is 7. But if we've got 100 pieces of data, we don't want to be crossing off either end to find the middle score. So we want to just find a quicker way to work out which is the median score. If we have an even number, so in this case it's an even number of scores, then we do that same calculation of 8 plus 1 over 2. This time we get 4.5. So in other words, that's telling us we want to take the average of the 4th and the 5th score. So we're looking at the 4th and the 5th. So 1, 2, 3, 4, we want the average of those two to get our median. So the median will be 7 plus 9 over 2, which is 8. So that's our median, the average of the 4th and the 5th score. When we plot the data, we can see it what's called a distribution. So that means here we've got, this could be like a dot plot where we've got our scores are along here, and this axis here, this height, could be looking at the frequency. So we may have a histogram or we've got a dot plot showing our values. But basically, if our data is symmetrical, then our mean and our median will lie in the middle and pretty well the same value. Even if it's what's called bimodal, we've got two modes. As long as it's symmetrical, then our mean and median are in the same location. However, if our data is not symmetrical, so it might be positively skewed, which means it's coming stretched out, there's more data on this side, out the positive direction of our axis, or negatively skewed, which means there's more data on this negative side of the axis, then our mean and median will not be lining up with the mode. In this symmetrical data, up the top here, our mode is matching our mean and median. But in this case, the mode doesn't, because this is the mode here, and here we've got two different modes. But when we have it positively skewed, the median and the mean, they will be greater than the mode. They'll be slightly higher. And in this case, where it's negatively skewed, the mean and median will be some way less than the mode. So you can have a rough idea where it is, but you're only going to know exactly by calculating it. The median is what we call a resistant measure of centre. If it's resistant, it resists a change, and that means it will always indicate the middle regardless of extreme values in the data set. In other words, despite the outliers. So it doesn't get affected by outliers. It doesn't matter what the values are out here or how far out, the median is still going to be our middle score. Whereas the mean is non-resistant, which means it does get affected. So this is a non-resistant measure of centre, as it will be affected by skewed data or extreme values. So any outliers will affect the mean because the mean takes into account every piece of data. For ungrouped data, or even for group data, if we're adding scores to a set of data, then that will change the mean, the median, and maybe the mode. And we're going to look at that, some further examples of that later. The bimodal we've just talked about means we've got two modes. We talked about that on the previous page. Okay, so let's look at some examples here. So here's a set of data. The data is about the diameter of bacteria colonies as measured by a microbiologist 12 hours after seeding. So we want to run through some examples of data and using a calculator to find these out. So you should be able to put this sort of data into your calculator to calculate all these values. You could do it manually, and this is not a typical IB question, but that skill of being able to use your calculator is important. So we want to find the mean, the median, and the mode. So what we do is we'll go to our calculators, and the first job there is to put all your data into your calculator. So we can see here I've gone through and entered the data. So you might want to pause the video at this point and enter it in. So have it in your calculators and keep it until we get to class, and then we're going to work on that. So pause the video and enter the data. Okay, you should have that entered by now. So once all that's data in, don't forget you need a label at the top, and I've just called it example because it's going to match the example we're working on. We want to put in another page, and we're going to put in a calculator page so we can calculate the statistics. So if you go to menu, makes sense, we go to statistics, stat calculations. How many variables have we got? One. We're just measuring, looking at the diameters that are varying. We've got one list of data. Our data list is example. That's what I've called it. We've got one of each of those pieces of data, and then it comes up with all these values. So it tells us our mean, the sum of the scores is 86.4. Sigma x squared, we're not going to really use much. Sx and sigma x are the standard deviations. We'll talk about that in a later section. N is the number of scores, and down here we have our median. The minimum, Q1, Q3, and the maximum, we're going to talk about in the next section as well. So what we might do is just capture this and put it into the file so you've got a record of it. All right. So there's that data that tells us our mean, and I'm just going to shrink that a little bit and also capture the standard, the median. So these other values down the bottom are also important. So I'll capture that and put that in and shrink that a little bit. So there's our two ones. The important ones we're looking at here are the mean and the number of scores to check we've put the right number of scores in, and the median. All right, so you should be able to do that with your calculators. We're going to look at this example in class where we change some values and see what effect that has on the mean and the median. The next one here we want to go to is sometimes with data like this we could group the data. So I've just used the same set of data and we're grouping the data. So I'm going to group it from 0 to 1, 1 to 2, etc. And I'm going to have 0 and up to 1.0 where the 1.90 is not included. So see here, I've put not included, whereas the 0 is included. This other notation says the same thing. The square brackets means the 0 is included. The curved bracket means it's not included. So that's another way we could write that range of values. For group data, because it's continuous data, we don't have discrete data in this case, so it's continuous data. We've got it grouped. It's not very exciting writing. We need our class centers, and I've worked out the frequencies. So our frequencies are there, and we need to be able to come up with our frequency histogram. So coming back here, earlier I put the data in, and this has got all our data. Oops, let's come up to our data. Good, there's our data all put in. We now want to do a graph of this. I'm going to add a data and statistics page, not that one. Sorry, we'll try again. Control Insert, Option 5, Data and Statistics. And which variable am I going to use? I want to use data. All right, so there's our 5 pieces of data. Now here, if we want to have a histogram, what we do is come over here, but don't click that, but come over and do Control Menu, and it didn't work. Let's try again. You hover over that, and while it's hovered over that, Control Menu. Nope. You're meant to come up with a Y variable. So I don't want to click on it. We just hover there. Control Menu. Will it work this time? No. Try again. All right, now it's worked. So we want to do it until we get this Add Y Summary List. So when we press that, no, it didn't work again. I'll pause and try again. All right, so when you get to Add Y Summary List, finally we get to that frequency coming up. So it may have been not working properly with me trying to do it on the slate. Anyway, what we want to do is get these bars all joined together like a histogram. So we go to Plot Properties, Histogram Properties, Bin Settings. That tells us the width of the columns. We want equal bin settings. We want them a width of 1, and we want them starting at 0. And so we go and get our nice looking histogram. So I'll run that through again. To change the bin settings, you go to Menu, number 2, Plot Properties, Option 2, what have we got there? Bin settings, number 2. We want equal bin settings, number 1. We change it to a width of 1 because that was how wide each of our groups were. and the alignment, we're starting at 0. All right, so now we can get a nice looking histogram of our data. There we go, and that's what our histogram looks like. Now we can run through all the statistics for that. So remember, if we go back to our calculator page, we can then go back to, let's just put a new calculator page in for that one. So we want menu, 6 statistics, 1 for stat calculations, 1 variable stat still. We still have 1 list. Our X1 list is called data. Our frequency now is our frequency column. Don't worry about the others. And now we come up with our statistics. You will note now that our mean is not going to be the same because it's only an estimate. We've rounded it by doing group data. So our mean will not be the same. So our mean here is 2.9. All right, whereas previously our mean was 2.88. So we've got an estimate here. And let's go and get the median. Come down here. What's our median now? Let's just capture that data. So we get slight changes because it's grouped. So this is taking a little bit longer today because we're looking at working with the calculator as well. So our median is here at 3.5. All right. So we've now got our median at 3.5. Our mean was 2.9, which compared to back here, we had a mean of 2.88 and our median was 3.15. So slight changes when we do that. So here's our median, oops, our mean and our median down here. Actually, note up here, if we've got our group data, our median is going to be our middle score. So that's going to come in at 3.5, which is somewhere in that class. It's in the class of 3 to 4. So for group data, we're going to go, it's in that class of 3 to 4. All right, our modal class will also be the same because that's got the highest frequency. The last one here was looking at the cumulative frequency. Remember how to come up with a cumulative frequency? So we start off with 3 here. Then what we're doing is adding 3 plus 4 makes 7. 7 plus 6 is 13. 13 plus 12 is 25. 25 plus 5 is 30. This is a good handy way of finding our median. For 30 pieces of data, then our average is going to be between the 15th and the 16th, which is in here for the median. So the average of the 15th and the 16th score. And that's easy to see when we've got the cumulative frequency. Okay, so thanks for listening today, IB. There's lots of questions we'll look at in class. Oh, sorry, one last bit here was the dot plots. You also probably remember those. That's to sit out differently. And remember, you can just put all that data in to get your mean. The median is your middle score. If you've got 17 pieces of data, then our mean will be the 9th piece of data. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9th. There's our median. It's also our mode because it's the highest number of scores for 5. and the mean into your calculator and it comes out as 5. So they're the main different ways that we'll present data and how to get your mean, median, mode. Thanks for listening and for working on all of that with your calculator. Please bring your calculators to class with the data still in it. So thanks for listening. We'll see you in class.